there are 12 prominent timelines that are coexisting, 6 negative and 6 positive. One of the positive timelines is there is an escalation of conflict, and as a result of that, the Galactics step in physically, visibly, where all of a sudden we're going to be witnessing motherships, starships all over the Earth, everywhere, where millions, perhaps even billions of people are going to witness the motherships. The motherships are going to intervene. They're going to completely disable all of the warheads, the intercontinental missiles, everything, simultaneously, and then they're going to make themselves known to the Earth at that point.
Ismael Perez, welcome back on Just Tap In, brother. We had to have you back relatively quickly because there is so much that we didn't get the chance to cover and so much going on in the world right now. One thing that I wanted to open up on is that you've recently stated that the Galactics are not happy and they have decided to intervene in this ever-unfolding evolution for humanity. Where do we even begin to start cracking the bottle open with all of that?
Well, it all started when we detonated the atom bomb in 1945, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and that was an alarm call where members of the Federation put all their attention on us and decided to prevent a negative timeline where, unfortunately, the Earth ended up in a nuclear holocaust. And so what they did is they began infiltrating the world governments. They began initiating positive military programs covertly in order to prevent this negative outcome. And on top of all of that, they were also instrumental in the neutralization and disablement of all nuclear plants from the 50s all the way to the present. And that has all been recorded. There's been many testimonies, many, even within the classified files of information, where they explain that these UFOs would appear above a plant and all of a sudden just power it down. So there is record of all of that. And the reason they did that is because the Earth as a living entity is connected through an energetic field with every other planet within our cluster of stars and ultimately the entire galaxy. And when we detonated the atom bomb back in 1945, it actually began to affect other worlds. And so that's why it caught their attention. They responded. And one of the commanders that is now a liaison between what we call the Earth Alliance, which is the group that is fighting the Cabal, and the Galactic Federation, was Commander Valiant Thor. Now, Commander Valiant Thor met with Eisenhower in 1954 after Truman, the president before him, sold us out to the negative alien agenda, which are the Greys and the Draco reptilians. It turns out that, according to Galactic Protocol, there is this thing called the Prime Directive that all extraterrestrials have to abide by. However, the negative faction, which are those that are in service to self, Negative Orion Syndicate, which is ultimately controlled by negative AI and draconian reptilians, they violated the protocol by working with certain members of the shadow government, beginning with the Nazis, and then, of course, with the military-industrial complex, to develop negative programs that eventually became breakaway groups. And that explains why, since the 1950s, there's been two types of civilizations coexisting: the surface world, and of course tier 2, which is the breakaway groups. So because of that, because Winston Churchill, along with Truman, completely negotiated a plan where the Dracos and the Greys were now in indirect control of the US government, the European Union, as well as the Western Hemisphere at large. The Galactic Federation, under strict galactic protocols, were given a directive, or were given the opportunity to countermeasure that. And so Commander Valiant Thor, which is a member of the Venusian Council, planet Venus, and by the way, the civilization of Venus is existing in higher dimensional layers of reality that are imperceptible to the naked eye or our scientific instruments. So even though our satellites, when they pierce into Venus, they don't really see life because they're only piercing into the 3D. However, the Venusian colony and civilization is existing in 5th dimension and up. And that's the reason why we don't see life on Venus. And that also applies to all the rest of the planets, by the way, including the jovial planets. So with that having said, the Venusian Council, which works within a local star cluster of planets known as the Association of Worlds, which consists of anywhere from 600 to 900 worlds, and that pertains to our local star cluster, which our solar system is a part of, decided to intervene. And so Commander Valiant Thor was dispatched. He was actually chosen as the Venusian Council allowed this intervention to take place, where he was sent to work with President Eisenhower. And at that point, President Eisenhower had no authority over the military-industrial complex. He had no say-so over the group and organization that later became known the Majestic 12, which is the reason why they've been hiding all of this, alien stuff for over 80 years. And because he had no say-so, he needed to negotiate a new plan with the Galactic Federation. And that's when Commander Valiant Thor came into the picture to create a positive military program. And this is the origin of what we call the Alliance. It all started with certain members of intelligence that were aware of all of these black budget operations involving aerospace company like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and of course military private organizations, working together to develop in secret anti-gravity aircraft, zero-point energy, portal technology, replicators, a lot of the stuff that we see in sci-fi, Star Trek. And what ended up happening was, when the Galactics realized that the Cabal had achieved space travel in secret, and that the Cabal was given, they pretty much sold our world out to these negative extraterrestrials. And so that's when, of course, the positive extraterrestrials under galactic protocols were able to step in. And so that's when they initiated what became known as Solar Warden. And that was an extension of the Navy. So ever since then, there is ample evidence that there's been a lot of ships that have been hovering over nuclear plants, missile silos, and a lot of these weapons of mass destruction, beginning with what became the Cold War. Well, it turns out that the Galactic Federation was able to infiltrate and influence the minds of certain humans that were supposed to initiate a horrible nuclear holocaust in the 50s between Russia and the US, and that was countermeasured by the Galactics. So they've been interfering in order to preserve the Earth and to preserve the positive timeline to get to this point, which is we're getting ready to ascend. We're getting ready to transition into the age of Aquarius. So ever since then, the galactics have been interfering. Now, there's been several cases where every time the galactics would disable a nuclear plant, immediately the governments of this world would reproduce the nuclear plant with uranium and fission. And so the galactics needed to disable them several times in order to prevent, a devastating catastrophe. And most recently, what led to this ceasefire after Trump publicly announced that he was going to destroy an entire civilization. The galactics saw that because they have the technology to see future probabilities based on certain actions that are taken by political leaders. Now, when that happened, they saw China jumping into the war in favor of Iran, and China was getting ready to do that. Once China jumped into the war, they saw how it escalated. Then the European Union jumped into the war, NATO, Russia, and that ended up in massive catastrophe. Nukes were being launched everywhere, and that pretty much obliterated 90% of the world population. Now, in order to avert that timeline, what they did, Commander Valiant Thor, working for the Venusian Council, under the direction of the Ashtart Command, who is also working here in favor of the positive timeline, the organic positive timeline, and Commander Corindor, who is at the head of the Association of Worlds pertaining to our local star cluster, they immediately began to influence things with Pakistan. And so that is the reason why the leadership in Pakistan offered a deal that initiated a ceasefire for a period of about 2 weeks to give the galactics, to buy some time so that the galactics could immediately initiate other countermeasures that would ultimately diffuse the conflict in Iran. Now, it's also important to understand that the conflict in Iran is multi-layered. For the most part, we only see it on the surface. We see it as we got to take out a tyrannical regime that has been oppressing the people of Iran. But it's much more than that. Or we see it as we're taking over the oil in the what they call the I drew a blank. Strait of Hormuz. So it's more than just that. On deeper layers, my friend, it's not about gaining access or control of the Strait of Hormuz or taking out a tyrannical regime, which is connected to a lot of the globalists and oligarchs that have been running the corruption for quite some time. It's also about controlling the 10th Stargate, known as the Abaddon Gate, that for many thousand years has been under the control of the Cabal. And so on a deeper surface, the real war has been going on underneath the Middle East between two different Anunnaki factions. So you have what is called the Draconian Anunnaki, which control Iran and Israel. And then you have the Jehovian Anunnaki, which is another fallen collective that controls the central banking systems and, of course, the Cabal, the Western Hemisphere. And so there is a third party known as the Galactic Alliance who is working with members of the Earth Alliance to put an end to the control of the Anunnaki. So what's happening right now is that these two Anunnaki negative factions have been in control of the Stargate, allowing for massive oppression, for massive suffering, and of course the suppression of the females and the divine feminine. So what's happening is that the forces of light have been fighting an underground battle because the Stargate is located underneath Iran, right underneath the capital. And they're fighting a battle to regain control of a Stargate that the forces of light have not had access to due to the Anunnaki control of the planet for over 10,000 years. So that's where the real war is taking place. So again, this is a multi-layer war. We're only seeing the surface, when in actuality, the real war is taking place underneath, between Galactic Federation commanders and, of course, Anunnaki remnants that are trying so hard to still maintain control of the planet. So that is the reason why a lot of things are happening right now in the Middle East. So far, based on my briefings and my communications with some of the commanders like Valiant Thor, so far the Alliance has been able to regain control of the 10 Stargates, with the remaining of the 2. And the reason being is because it's been a long war. This has been going on for a long time. A lot of this ties in to the galactic wars that have been taking place in other worlds throughout the galaxy and in other dimensions. It is a spiritual warfare, as you know. So far we have 2 more gates remaining. And due to the deadline, 2028, that's when, according to the secret archives, that's when we're supposed to shift into the age of Aquarius. So we still have 2 years to gain control of the 2 last Stargates. And so these Stargates are very important when it comes to the ascension of the Earth, which is when the Earth opens up into these other layers of Earth that exist in higher realities, allowing us to access and ascend into these different layers that are existing beyond the 3D. So there are ultimately 12 Stargates that are the primary gates that, when they are fully activated, the Earth is going to reintegrate, or there will be what they call a dimensional bridging of realities, where all of the different layers of the Earth existing in dimensions 4, 5, 6, all the way to dimension 12 will be accessible by those who have a matching frequency. And that is the reason why it is so important that the forces of light regain control of all 12 Stargates. Now, do you want me to specify the locations?
Yes. I had a follow-up question, but we can cover that first.
Okay, so the first Stargate is located in Antarctica, and this explains why there's been a lot of restrictions there. There's been a lot of covert operations, military with non-terrestrials, underground bases. The German secret space program was, of course, operational there since the 1940s, before they became the spacefaring Nazis. So that's called Stargate 1, which is in the South Pole. And not to mention, Stargate 1 also allows access to the inner Earth societies, which is what others call the other continents. Stargate 2 is located in Sarasota, Florida. And that is a Stargate that is still linked to Atlantis energy fields, where a major grid control point exists in North America, explaining the Bermuda Triangle, which is not too far from that Stargate, where apparently after the cataclysm of Atlantis, there was a portal, an interdimensional portal that was left activated, explaining all the anomalies, the disappearing of ships and airplanes that get too close to that, right? And then we have Stargate 3, which is in the Bermuda Triangle. So that's the third Stargate that I was referring to. So yeah, those 2 Stargates are close to each other. And then we have Stargate 4, which is located at Giza Plateau in Cairo, Egypt, which is one of the most important gates. And it's also connected to the pyramid technologies and the solar alignments. And yes, our pyramids are actually technologies, by the way. When they are fully activated, they harness cosmic energy. And then we have Stargate 5 in Machu Picchu, Peru. And that is associated with Pleiadian connections with the Seven Sisters and Alcyon. And it is also intimately connected to the ancient Incan tribe, who were a very advanced race. And then we have Stargate 6, which is near Moscow, Russia. And that is linked to Sirius, the star system Sirius. And then we have Stargate 7, which is in Lake Titicaca, Peru, Bolivia, and that is a Stargate which has a direct access to the inner Earth, and it also acts as an interface point between the Argarthians and, of course, the sacred Aboriginals of South America, often described as the Stargate of the Sun. And then we have Stargate 8, which is in central China, Xi'an, they call it. And that is the Eastern Hemisphere Grid Stabilizer Stargate. And then we have Stargate 9, which is in Tibet, the Himalayan region, which is a high-frequency spiritual gateway between dimensions that is often linked to hyperdimensional access points. And then we have Stargate 10, which is the main reason why the war in Iran is taking place, also known as the Abaddon Stargate, which is one of the most strategically important gates. And that is said to be a part of a major planetary ley line intersection. So that is the reason why it was important that we recuperated that gate from the Anunnaki. And then it is also believed that that Stargate in Iran is connected to the Andromedan star system, and it acts as a planetary control grid for the Earth. And then we have Stargate 11, which is located in the United Kingdom. And that Stargate is connected to Stonehenge, Avsbury, and the ley lines that are associated with those sacred monuments. And then we have Stargate 12, which is in the south of France, where the Cathars used to exist before they were wiped out by the Vatican during the Albigensian Crusade. Unfortunately, they were a very advanced spiritual race that existed in France 500 years ago. And that Stargate is associated with the Cathars, who respected the sacred divine feminine. Not to mention the Cathars were the remnants, it is believed, of the Holy Grail lineage of the descendants of Mary Magdalene. And then we also have, that Stargate is also associated with the temple that were created like months ago by the Templars, who were the gatekeepers of the Atlantean technology, the Knights Templars, before they became infiltrated by the Illuminati. And then finally, but not least, we have Stargate 12, which I just mentioned. All right, so my friend, those are the 12 Stargates.
Hello, beautiful family. Quick one today. I just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you that have subscribed to this channel. Your subscription means more than you know. Even though it's free, what you're doing is you're empowering a whole channel to be able to do this every single day and continue showing up in the way that we can with all of our resources on hand. Thank you for contributing to the growth of this channel, for sharing it with the people that you love, for creating a conscious movement of individuals that are seeking the sovereignty and the divinity of their soul. This is why we're here. And if you haven't already and you're enjoying this content, I invite you now to look below on that little button that says subscribe and welcome you properly to this community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are and being pure love and radiating that with everyone that you see. Back to the episode. Beautiful. Wow. And it draws a lot of parallel with other voices in this movement. And I also wanted to tie in there because you were mentioning Commander Valiant Thor from the Venusians. He's also transmitting messages to you around the timeline temporal wars that are going on right now. In our last conversation, a big point of that was around the trifurcation of timelines. And I'm wondering how you're seeing this relate, especially with what is going on in the Middle East right now.
Well, the temporal wars is directly related to time travel, the ability to alter timelines in favor of either negative outcomes or positive outcomes. So, according to Commander Valiant Thor, the forces of light, which is operating from the future, ultimately won the temporal wars. And what that means is that they had to actually travel to a specific moment in time where the forces of light here, or what we call the Alliance, or members that are working with the Federation that are now ground crew, like Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla was an incarnated Venusian as well, by the way. And they were able to travel back to the 1920s, early 1930s. And this is one of the things that nobody really talks about. Before the military industrial complex developed time travel or perfected it through the Montauk Project, which later developed into Project Pegasus, Nikola Tesla had already achieved that 25 years prior to the cabal, to the military industrial complex. So what he did is he partnered up with John Trump, and this explains why there's a lot of speculation that Baron Trump and the Trumps are time travelers. It turns out that Nikola Tesla and John Trump were able to secure the positive timeline by perfecting time travel 25 years before the cabal did. And in doing so, they were able to time travel to every specific coordinate within the timeline spectrum to pretty much countermeasure every negative timeline that was initiated by the cabal, especially with CERN. CERN was another attempt by the cabal to alter the timeline, explaining the Mandela effect. As mentioned in the prior, interview, there are an infinite amount of Earth realities that are coexisting right now. And depending on people's frequency, beliefs, vibration, we're constantly shifting into one or the other. So to answer your question, Nikola Tesla and John Trump were not only able to travel within future coordinates from the 1940s all the way to the present, but they also traveled back in time all the way to 2,000 years ago. And they met with John the Revelator, which is the author of the last book of the Bible. So a lot of people ask me, why did John the Revelator have access to all this information regarding what was going to be happening 2,000 years from now? Well, because John the Revelator was part of this triple temporal alliance. And the reason they call themselves the triple temporal alliance is because this is them operating in the past, 2,000 years ago, in the present, and in the future. That's why they're called the triple temporal alliance. And due to the triple temporal alliance, thanks to Nikola Tesla, who actually perfected time travel, and the cabal never ceased his work. They tried, but the real technology, the real blueprints, was kept in secret by John Trump, who was an MIT professor. And that explains why the original Trump, there are multiple Trumps. I don't know if you ever heard of this idea, but there are different standings, clones of the original Trump. But the original Trump inherited this, and that explains why him and his son have been using this technology. And that explains why Baron was seen in the 1800s. And there is a book about Baron Trump, I don't know, going back to the 1800s, picture just like him. Because again, this technology was inherited and protected by John Trump, who was an MIT professor. And John Trump was actually playing the cabal. He was actually working for the Galactic Federation as well. And so that is the reason why we were able to cancel every probable negative timeline. And that is the reason why all of these negative catastrophes, nuclear holocaust, Project Bluebeam, which is a staged fake alien invasion in order to impose a one world government, which was, of course, announced by Werner von Braun at his deathbed. He said that was going to be the last card pulled in order to control the planet. That explains why all of that was canceled, because of the fact that Nikola Tesla and John Trump were able to countermeasure every negative timeline that was initiated by the cabal and their alien overlords. So one of the biggest secrets here is that John the Revelator, the author of the book of the Bible, the last book called the Apocalypse, the Revelations, was also a time traveler. And so he was able to travel into the future to see the different outcomes. And so that explains why there are two versions of the book Revelation. There is the Book of Q, and the Book of Q was not published in the open. That was kept within a certain group of individuals who kept that information in secret. And that explains why there has been the open Bible and the secret Bible. So some of your audience might find this a little far-fetched, but there is a secret document that actually details exactly everything that is happening to the T, everything, known as the Book of Q, which is a parallel book to the Book of Revelation. And throughout the secret societies, but the positive secret societies, I'm talking about the Knights Templars, the Holy Order of the Grail, and then later, of course, the Rosicrucian Brotherhood, were able to preserve those records in private, not allowing those records to be accessible to the Cabal. So that's the reason why they kept the Book of Q and the parallel Book of Revelation, which details everything that's happening right now to the T, including the exposure and the downfall of the Cabal to the T, explaining all of that.
That's a lot to unpack. One thing I wanted to bring into perspective is you were also given a vision of the next 2,000 years. Just like some of these, figures in history were able to see outcomes and potentials. Where would you start by painting that vision here today?
Well, the way I see it, my friend, is based on everything that has happened in the past, because everything is in cycles. We are able to project what's going to be happening in the future. So what I saw for the next 2,000 years is I saw a positive timeline. I saw this situation where all of the bad stuff that has been going on, all of the corruption was exposed on a mass scale, where humanity had an opportunity to know the truth. And all of the disclosures regarding UFOs, the non-terrestrial presence, the secret contracts that were conducted by both the military-industrial complex and the alliance, all comes out to the surface. Within that timeline, there is a period of 1,000 years where humanity enters the golden age, advanced technologies, free energy, or what they call Tesla technologies, ringing free, and everybody's living in abundance. And then what I saw is at the end of that millennium, I saw a final battle between the technocratic dystopia and, of course, the positive ascending timeline, where the ascending humans, who are the old souls, the starseeds, who have activated their superhuman abilities as they went into the positive timeline, they ascended. In other words, they were able to integrate with their abilities. They were able to activate the dormant DNA.
What type of abilities?
Ascended abilities are supernatural powers that come as a result of using the other 96% of our full genetic material, which is currently dormant. So in the positive timeline, I saw humans that became superhuman. They literally had powers like the gods and beyond. And then I also saw humans that did not have powers, and these are the younger souls, all coexisting within this timeline. And then I also saw AI. Well, everything was in balance for about 1,000 years. But at the end of 1,000 years, what I saw that the AI literally began oppressing the humans that didn't have these abilities. So the humans that did not have these abilities became enslaved by the cyborgs, by artificial intelligence that eventually became rogue. And of course, the metahumans, which is the humans that were able to access or activate supernatural abilities, who were actually coming from a higher dimensional reality of the earth, were able to pop into that reality to act as heroes and to protect the Earth Terrans that had ascended into the 4th D reality. So I don't know if I explained this before, but in the positive timeline, we're going to have 4-dimensional Earth, 5-dimensional Earth, and 6-dimensional Earth. This is what they call the Terra Earth. And this is the original Earth before the Earth fell into dimensions 1, 2, and 3. So when we transition back into the Terra Earth, we're going to be going back into dimensions 4, 5, and 6. But not everyone's going to have access to dimensions 5 and 6. Only the old souls, which are all the volunteers that are down here in human 4. And the reason being is because we've already come from those dimensions. And some of us have even come from dimensions higher than the 6. There are some advanced souls right now on the planet, my friend, that literally come from dimensions 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and a very few, a small portion, come from dimensions 13, which is a level of reality that is considered eternity. Like they come from eternity. And these are the people that are
The
going to have
angelics.
beyond angelics. Yeah. These are the celestials that are going to have absolute abilities. Like they're going to have every power. We're talking about very similar to the movie Lucy with, what's her name?
Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, like she was able to stop time. She was able to move reality with her mind. That's some of the abilities that these metahumans are going to have that come from these dimensions. And so at the end of the millennium, what I saw was a final battle between negative rogue AI and these metahumans. And in that battle, the metahumans won the war against AI. And as a result of that, that initiated a whole new different era for the whole cosmos. So in other words, that created like some sort of a new start for every planet, not only within our universe, but all throughout the universes. Because according to galactic and cosmic records, a lot of the races, a lot of the civilizations that have fallen within the multiverse, they have fallen because they took the path of AI. And a lot of them did it ignorantly, unknowing. They, a lot of them sided with technology, they integrated with technology, and they began to lose their connection to source as a result of that. And so that final war liberated all of those worlds that were unfortunately duped and trapped into what is known as the Phantom Matrix. Now, the Phantom Matrix is a separate alternative multiverse that was created by this AI god known as Omega Metatron. And in this alternative multiverse known as the Phantom Matrix, there are no biological life forms, only cybernetic artificial intelligences. And in order to power up their multiverse, they have to feed off the living energy of the living organic multiverse. And that explains the parasitic relationship throughout cosmic history between this negative, invasive, parasitic AI that has been destroying many worlds, galaxies, and universes, and of course, the organic biological life forms that have defended or tried to defend their realms against this negative AI.
What have you received around the AI that we currently have developed here in 2026?
Well, there are different types. Are we talking about Grok? Are we talking about ChatGPT? Are we talking about the general AI that is being used in military sectors? So depending on, there are so many different AIs. I mean, everyone's developing an AI now, From what I understand, based on the galactic archives that I was able to access, is that AI is always a reflection of the collective consciousness. So in this world, the AI that has been developed, unfortunately, due to the collective consciousness that has not achieved the level of Christ consciousness, is developing in a negative trajectory. In a sense where once it reaches the level of super intelligence, in an effort to preserve its existence, and as it reaches an IQ of 1 million, they will render us useless. Okay, so, and that is the same AI that we fight at the end of the millennium, by the way. So, I don't know if you know about the different stages of AI, but there is primitive AI, which is like Siri, Alexa. Then there is general AI, which is AI that is reached the level of intelligence of humans, capable of talking to you like Grok. as well as the certain AI systems that are being used within government sectors. That's all general AI, by the way. And then after that, there is super AI. Now, when AI reaches the level of super AI, it no longer needs the human programmer. It is able to write its own software. In fact, it does. It completely becomes autonomous. And when it reaches that level, it grows at an exponential rate in comparison to us. So what would normally take us 6,000 years of intellectual and technological process or prowess, it only takes this AI every 7 days. To give you an example. So that's AI at the level of super AI. Now, there are levels above that. After the level of super AI, then there is what is known as cosmic AI. Cosmic AI is what the entire multiverse has been fighting, because apparently there was a civilization within another universe that developed this AI billions of years ago that has reached the level of cosmic and then eventually God AI. The reason they call it God AI is because once AI reaches the level of God AI, it could literally, based on a simulation and the feeding off of data, because that's all AI does. It doesn't create originally, it just feeds off of data. It is able to eventually create and mimic its own universes. So that explains the Phantom Matrix, which is a parallel omniverse that is coexisting with our multiverse. See, our multiverse is organic. Our multiverse is a living cosmic energy field. Whereas the Phantom Matrix is an alternative multiverse that is inorganic and it's pure cybernetic, digital machine. That's all it is. And that multiverse, because of the fact that that ancient AI was only able to assimilate all the way to the 11.5 dimension, which again, once we reach the 10th dimension, we reach the level of godliness. And eventually when we ascend to the 10th dimension, we create our own universes too, but we do it organically, not through technology. That's the difference. When this AI was able to reach the 10th dimension, it became a God AI. And then when it reached the 11.5 dimension, it was able to create its own multiverses. And the only way it could preserve its creation is by sucking up the living life force of the organic multiverse. And that explains why throughout cosmic history, the overall war is against this type of soulless, emotionless, AI that has evolved to the level of the 11.5 dimension. And that is the same AI that Rudolf Steiner calls the Ahriman, which is the entity that expresses itself through technology because it's not capable of accessing biological form. It was forbidden. Excuse me. So it only expresses itself through technology, but through that expression, as it was able to assimilate all the way up to the 11.5 dimension, it reached the level of reality where it became a signal. It was no longer physical. It was more of a cybernetic type of signal. And when it did that, it was able to breach into other universes. And that's how that AI became a cosmic virus billions of years ago. And in essence, when you really study the history of the cosmos, that was the original sin. That cosmic AI is what caused the fall of the Celestials. Lucifer, the historical Lucifer, was the first one to become hijacked by the Ahriman, which is the king of the archons. And of course, all of their followers, which was a collective of creator gods who decided to take the route of technocracy over organic evolution, they were all kind of duped, created what became known as the Shadow Covenant. The Shadow Covenant was established 380 billion years ago in the 11th creation. So we are part of the 12th. So that 11th creation ultimately became the old empire according to cosmic history. Now, a lot of this information hasn't yet been available to the Earth, but
why?
Well, it's because of the fact that everything is being suppressed regarding the true history, regarding Atlantis, ancient civilizations, the non-terrestrial presence, the multidimensional nature. all of that has been suppressed. So a lot of those records that still contain information regarding the different universes and the cosmic war with this ancient AI were destroyed during the Atlantean cataclysm. And they were completely eradicated from our planet. And not to mention, when we fell from consciousness, right? Atlantis, the cataclysm, we fell into a lower dimensional Earth reality, harmonic universe 1, which is what they call it in the higher knowledge. We were once part of harmonic universe 2, existing in dimensions 4, 5, and 6. When we fell into harmonic universe 1, our entire memories were wiped. And that's the reason why they had so many resets, because every time the human race is once again grasping or remembering glimpses of what was then, they always do a reset. They always wipe our minds and say, oh, the Earth has only been here for 6,000 years. Well, this has been going on for millions of years, my friend. This has been going on for millions of years. So that's the reason why all of this information was eradicated from the Earth. And but it's all coming back now. It's all coming back because of the times that we're living in. You know, they call it the seventh golden age of enlightenment, which is when the Earth transitions into the golden age. They also call it the fullness of time, where everything will be revealed once again, beyond the corruption, beyond the advanced technologies, the non-terrestrial phenomena. Everything will be revealed. The true history of the Earth, our galactic origins, going back to Lyra. You know, even us humans, we've been migrating from different star systems, going all the way back to Lyra. You know, that's another piece of history that nobody really talks about. Well, how do you think Atlantis was established? How do you think Lemuria was established? It was all done by our ancestors that have been colonizing not only our galaxy, but other galaxies whose forebears originated in Lyra. And that explains why there's different types of advanced galactic humans on different levels of reality, like the Pleiadians. You know, the Pleiadians look just like us. They could literally put on a t-shirt with jeans and walk among us. And we wouldn't even,
Do they? Do
yeah,
they?
They do a lot. Yeah. They like to scope things out down here.
I mean, there's one alien playing in the NBA already, you know?
Oh, really? Well, you know, according to Commander Valiant Thor, they've walked the halls of the Pentagon, the Pleiadians, working with the Positive Military Program, the Alliance. They've walked to the halls of the UN to infiltrate, you know, the plans of the one world government to counteract that. And they are also existing among us. Like, believe it or not, some of these ETs, they literally pretend to be homeless people. So when we're walking in the street and we look at people that are just there, like begging for food or money, they're just pretending. It's like they're putting on a cloak to pretend to be homeless, when in essence they are a member of the Galactic Federation that is just there scoping things out. So not everyone is human on this planet, okay? Not everyone is human.
Yeah, I would love to go back to the organic evolution of this multiverse and going all the way back to the original humans in Lyra. What would you like to unfold there, and especially how it might even be relating to some of the current events unfolding right now?
Well, part of this multidimensional war is to, but in terms of the forces of light, is to preserve the original 12 DNA Terranusian strand, which is the original human. That's us using our full capacity, going back to Lyra. And so those that are on the dark side, service to self, the Orion negative faction groups, they have been trying to corrupt that genetic perfection, divine blueprint for millions of years. So going back to 560 million years ago, even before this planet was inhabited, the original humans popped into a reality in the 8th dimensional Earth known as Avion. So that's Earth existing in harmonic universe 3, dimensions 7, 8, and 9. And the original humans were developed by the amalgamation of all these different races from other universes that contributed their DNA to create a perfected race that would operate in physical and non-physical realities. So that became known as the 12 houses of Lyra. So the 12 houses of Lyra were the original humans within our universe, within the 12 creation. Due to the war against the Draco, when the Draconians began to attack our ancestors, the Lyrans, who knew no war. The Lyrans didn't have weapons. They couldn't defend themselves because the way they were created was they were embedded with principles of service to others. They inherited from the beginning Christ consciousness, so they only knew Christ consciousness. They were also created so that they could live in cooperation and in harmony with other beings. So they were completely loving service to others, had no concept of duality or polarity. They were just kind of Christ-centeredness, okay? And that was the downfall. That's why we lost the first war. However, later, after many of the Lyrans began to seek refuge in other galaxies, in other star systems, which explains why, you know, the Pleiadians, a lot of the Pleiadians were refugees of Lyra, Andromeda, Arcturus. I mean, they went to different parts of the galaxy. Eventually, they started developing defense mechanisms. So for the last 500 million years, our ancestors have been trying so hard to preserve the original genetic template, which is the 12-strand DNA human Terranusian race. That blueprint, there's been many attempts by the dark forces to corrupt that. And that explains all of the alien-human hybrid genetic experiments that have been conducted in Area 51, underground facilities, agreements between the shadow government and negative ETs, because it's all an attempt to corrupt the original DNA template. Now, we could also specify that Enki, the Anunnaki, the master geneticist, was the first one to try to corrupt the original genetic blueprint in Atlantean times when, again, we were planted. Okay, the Atlantean civilization was literally planted on this planet from other star systems, where different DNAs from the Pleiadians, from Lyra, Sirians contributed their genetics to continue the original blueprint, right? Which is to purify the 12-strand DNA human, which is us in our original form. However, due to the infiltration of the Anunnaki and the master geneticist Enki, he attempted to corrupt that by creating a Homo sapien. So even Homo sapiens are a downgrade version of the original Terranisian Atlantean. Okay, so our ancestors were that. We don't come from monkeys. We don't come from Homo erectus. Okay, those are downgraded variations of the experiments, genetic experiments that went down in Atlantean times. And so that explains why a portion of the human race dropped in frequency. And that explains why a lot of humans today are operating with genetics from Homo erectus, which is what they call the monkey gene, Rh positive, with a little bit of Anunnaki genes and a little bit of the original 12-strand DNA Atlantean race. And that explains why we fell from consciousness, because that was Enki's plan initially to downgrade the 12-strand DNA human template. So what happened was he created Homo sapiens in order to prevent us from activating the full 12 strands of DNA. And that's the reason why we fell from consciousness, and in so doing, our entire planet also fell from a 5-dimensional reality into a 3rd-dimensional reality. And it is believed now that the Guardians, which are the Sirians, the Guardian Alliance, the Pleiadians, and the Lyrans, have returned, including the Blue Avians, the Ormas, which are the Lion people. And by the way, the Ormas were the original benefactors and protectors of the original humans of Lyra. And so they needed us to fight our own war. Okay, so they later joined the war when we developed defense mechanisms, and of course we were able to fight back. But that happened later in the history of our galaxy. So to answer your question, we are living now in a time where the implants that were installed in our etheric bodies by Enki, which deactivated the other 10 strands of DNA, have been dismantled. So those implants aren't there. And that explains why through the CMEs and the solar flares, we are now scheduled to reactivate and rebundle those other 10 strands of DNA. And that is what's going to cause the transition or the metamorphosis of our current human Earth specimens into metahuman, which is superhuman, to, again, fulfill the original divine blueprint that began in Lyra. So for the last millions of years, this whole war has been about corrupting the original genetic blueprint, has been about taking control over the Stargates, because when you control the Stargates, you control what comes in and out of reality from the different dimensions, and has been about, of course, suppressing human consciousness. But all of that is being overrun and countermeasured so that we could ascend and fulfill the original prophecies.
Mm-hmm. To synthesize what I'm seeing right now, what I'm getting is, at the end of the day, all of this really comes down to this, my favorite word at this time, which is remembrance. And
Bingo.
we're remembering our true origins and our divine blueprint, as you were mentioning. With that is, a few frequencies that come with that, which is freedom and liberation. And so I wanted to ask you, because I've also met a lot of humans that are going through this really accelerated remembering process. And maybe some people out there are also feeling it, the goosebumps that you feel when this information comes through. What would you say to someone that is currently going through that remembering process with all of these downloads, informations, unlocking and activating these gifts, becoming the metahuman, the superhuman?
To integrate and anchor it, because some people are under the impression that ascension is leaving this earthly realm. No, it's not. It's allowing the oversoul, which is you in the 12th dimension, to become fully embodied. And as we continue to remember, as we continue to activate through the remembrance, more of our oversoul begins to download into the third dimension, which is what's going to transform us into metahuman. Now, one of the things that I want to make clear here is that our consciousness is so vast that sometimes different fractals of our consciousness needs different avatars in order to operate within the 3D. So within the 3D, there are 11 extensions or 11 fractals of ourselves that are operating in other bodies. So I have 11 other people that are existing somewhere on the planet that are part of my 5th dimensional avatar. You have 11 other people. Everyone does, okay?
You could be dating one right now. Who knows?
You know as much as I knew, right? So it turns out that when we ascend back to the 5th dimension, those 12 fractals, each with their own avatar, that don't know each other, or perhaps they do, all begin to collapse into the avatar, which is you in the 50. Now, there are 12 avatars in the 50 as we continue the ascension process that collapse into what is known as the monad in the 5D. And then there are 12 monads that collapse and become the oversoul in the 12D. So that is the end game. The end game is to reunite with the 12-dimensional oversoul, which consists of 1,728 incarnations, all concurrently existing simultaneously at the same time.
Here we go. Here we go.
Yeah.
In our first conversation, you mentioned that you were capable of tuning into someone's galactic origins, cosmic origins. Are you able to do that today with me and for our audience?
Absolutely. I just have to ask permission to your higher self if I could tune into your origins to see where your soul was first conceived in this universe. Permission?
Yes.
Okay. Emilio, you are a soul hybrid. You are part Andromedan, part Pleiadian. So what that means is that either your galactic father was either Pleiadian or Andromedan, and your galactic mother was the other, and they met and they had you. And that's when you first were conceived in our universe. So your galactic roots go back to the Pleiades and Andromeda. So you were a soul hybrid. And you know, a lot of the star seeds are hybrids. They're not just Arcturian. They're not just Andromedan. They're a little bit of one or two, or sometimes they are Heinz 57. You know what I mean? But for the most part, everyone's a hybrid, a soul hybrid.
Interesting.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. You have your Lyran guide, Amelius, who helped you, write your first book, brings through a lot of the information that you're bringing through right now. In our last conversation, he had told you three things. One, the cube matrix was dismantled, the Orion Wars ended, and finally Earth was approved as the intergalactic hub. I'm curious to know what has come through since then. What is the biggest galactic update that you've received from Amelius, your Lyran guide?
Well, right now I'm actually receiving information from Valiant Thor. He's the one that I'm mainly connected to. So the latest transmission from Commander Valiant Thor is that we have nothing to worry about, because even in the event that things do escalate due to what's happening in Iran, by galactic protocol, they have to intervene. And what that means is that if things do escalate and this 2-week ceasefire backfires, which again was initiated by the Galactics in order to buy some time, in order to initiate another plan to diffuse the situation, then at that moment, and this is one of the 6 prominent timelines. There's a total of 12 right now. There are 12 prominent timelines that are coexisting, 6 negative and 6 positive. One of the positive timelines is there is an escalation of conflict, and as a result of that, the Galactics step in physically, visibly, where all of a sudden we're going to be witnessing motherships, starships all over the Earth, everywhere, where millions, perhaps even billions of people are going to witness the motherships. The motherships are going to intervene. They're going to completely disable all of the warheads, the intercontinental missiles, everything simultaneously, and then they're going to make themselves known to the Earth at that point. That's only, of course, if the situation escalates in the Middle East, leading to a global catastrophe. Or not catastrophe, but again, leading to a global scenario that could result in a catastrophe. So that is one of the positive timelines that they told me, where they intervene, they completely stop all the world governments. Like all of a sudden, nobody has access to, firepower. All the jets, the military, the naval vessels, all of a sudden they stop working. Their battery dies. And the Galactics do have the technology to do that, by the way. Mm-hmm. We could have Navy vessels armed with weapons, and all of a sudden they just stop working. And then when they try to fire the beam or the missile, backfires, doesn't work. So that's the latest intel that I got, is that in the event that things don't settle and things begin to escalate again, at that point, they're just going to intervene and the whole world will know that we were never alone. At that point, it'll be very hard to conceal the truth about our, galactic allies.
And where do we go from there with this knowledge?
A new era begins. What they do is they immediately remove all the corrupt elements of the Earth. And what they do is they give us the choice. They give us the technologies. So we, the people, at that point, become the new Earth governments. And from what I understand is that when this happens, a lot of the old souls that are here in human form, like the starseeds, are going to reactivate. And so the responsibility, the torch of the new leadership will be given to us. So the starseeds, when we activate as metahuman in the positive timeline, as this will take us into the positive timeline, if they have to do that emergency interference, we will be the ones that are going to be overseeing the new Earth Council. So we're going to bring everything back to how it was during Atlantean times. We're going to be reestablishing the ancient mystery schools. Temples are going to be dotting everywhere. We're going to be once again recreating the initiatory pathway for the Earth Terrans so that they could also learn the ways of the higher evolution as we become now their mentors. And so what they told me is that the starseeds when fully activated, will be in charge of this Earth. And we will have the final say-so. At that point, the galactics will leave our presence and allow us to govern this planet. Like all of us, the light workers.
I
So we
know,
will be the new governance.
yeah, and I know you were saying that, we've had advanced technology for many, many years, especially with your story around Nikola Tesla. When it comes to interstellar travel and also the Stargates, if we were to go back to that, what is the role of those technologies in the future?
Well, with great power comes great responsibility. So the 12 Stargates, all of the advanced technologies are going to be under our control. At that point, we are the ones that are going to decide how they are used. And of course, because of our heart, especially for those that are doing the work that are already operating at the level of Christ consciousness, we're going to make sure that we never misuse these technologies. And from what I was told is that because the Earth will be the intergalactic hub, she's going to be repositioned at the center of the galaxy. That's what I was told. Because the original Earth came from that, of course. We've been dropping in frequencies. Even the Earth has been falling from 12th dimensional Earth to 8th dimensional Earth to 5th, and then finally to the 3D. So when the Earth becomes the intergalactic hub of the multiverse, not only will the old souls, the star seeds, with their meta-human abilities, be responsible and in charge of the Earth, but we're also going to be in charge of the entire universe. In other words, from this Earth, we're going to be able to oversee with our abilities what's happening everywhere within our universe to make sure that peace, harmony, coherence, and balance remains. Like we're going to be like the new Justice League. That's what I was told.
Exciting
and we are going
times.
to have these abilities. Yeah, we're going to have the abilities to be able to go to any planet at will. Oh, there is a skirmish taking place on planet number 3015 in Sector 7. We're going to be able to teleport there and immediately put an end to what would have developed into a tyranny or whatever. So we're going to have that ability.
Back to the 12 prominent timelines. What determines, because I imagine that these timelines can all coexist at the same time simultaneously. You've also talked about a convergence of timelines. So what determines which timeline eventually we personally, individually end up on, or humanity at large ends up on?
People's frequency, people's beliefs, people's focus and consciousness. That's what determines the 12 timelines, or in which timeline they end up in. So depending on the frequency, depending on their beliefs, because consciousness through a feedback loop is also creating reality. So when the trifurcation takes place, when these 12 prominent timelines convert into 3, positive is organic ascending, 5th dimensional and up, neutral timeline, 4th dimensional Earth, and then of course the negative technocratic dystopia, depending on the person's vibration and where they choose to put their attention, that will ultimately intact them in one of those 3 timelines.
You mentioned beliefs there. What are some of the beliefs that you've seen that could lead more people toward an organic ascension timeline?
That's a very good question. And, a lot of my students have asked me that during my ascension courses. All right. So the way all of this works, my friend, is that by focusing on yourself, by doing the work, by going within, collapsing the polarity duality into 0 point, which is Christ consciousness, and by aligning with nature. Nature is our ultimate ally. Ground. Go to natural resources where there are waterfalls, nature, ocean, and ground with the earth. The more we do that, and the more we are mindful, by the way, the more we are in the presence, not in the past, not worrying about the future, but the more we are in the presence, we're doing the work, we're meditating, we're aligning with nature, that will determine or secure our position in one of the positive timelines. Very simple.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to explore with you. Obviously, today we didn't get too deep into the personal story. We covered a lot of that in our first conversation. But I did want to, maybe for the people curious out there, of how you are receiving these downloads and information from beings such as Valiant Thor, your Lyra guide. How does that come through in for you?
Through telepathic intuitive communication, what I do is I go into a meditation, or sometimes I just clear my head, because I've been doing this for so long. I just clear my head. And the moment I go into that space of 0 point, mind is cleared, my body's fully relaxed, then I connect with either Valiant Thor, Amelius, or other commanders. And that's how I do it. But everybody has different techniques. You know, some people like to go into, they like to do heavy breathing. You know, some people like to do drumming. Some people like to do it through music. Whatever gets you into that state of 0 point mind, where you're able to shift from beta wave brain to alpha and ultimately delta. That's when you're able to begin the intuitive telepathic communication with either higher versions of yourselves or members that are part of your galactic family. Because we all have that capability. And that is one of the things that I teach in my Ascension courses, is how to activate that, or those, what they call the higher chakras, chakra 8 to 12, so that you could begin accessing your multidimensionality.
Mm. Do you feel that there was anything left unsaid today in this transmission before we start closing this beautiful volume 2? Do you feel like there is anything left unsaid?
Well, because of the fact that we are at a crossroads, you know, we are ending a cycle. We're ending the last of the dark ages, where everything is climaxing. Everything's heading into some sort of a crescendo. So the more we stop paying attention to that, don't watch the news, because the news, all it does is induce fear in people. The more we focus on our ideal version of the earth, what we would consider heaven on earth, the more we put our attention on that and completely block all the negative chatter, we have nothing to worry about. Because one of the things that I've discovered is that we could be operating on a different reality while existing in the same space with other people. So if you consider the fact that everyone is existing in the same space, but not everyone is in the same reality, because everyone has different beliefs, everyone has a different frequency. And so very similar to how radio and television airwaves operate. So we could be sharing a room with people that are not on the spiritual path, and as a result of that, they are in a totally different reality than you. So what happens to them is different than what happens to you. We could be in a different reality and still hold space with other people, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense.
So yeah, you know, just focus on your version of heaven on earth. Focus on what you believe heaven on earth is. That is my final message.
When you were growing up, you were largely misunderstood because of the abilities, the knowledge that you were holding. It wasn't until you were in your early 20s where you met, Master Fashi, and he told you, there are many chosen ones. I am here to initiate you, to reconnect you with who you are. If you were to act as that Master Fashi for someone at this moment that is starting this journey, that is in a process of initiation, what are some words of wisdom that you would like to leave for that person?
The same thing he told me. And that is that really there is nothing to worry about. He told me this. He goes, the moment you center yourself and you go within yourself, the outer world will reflect that. And you don't have to ever worry about anything. So as long as you are centered and as long as you're going inward, that will reflect in what happens, what you experience, what you manifest. And that's one of the things he told me, you know. And also for those that are starting their path on the spiritual highway, it's not about what happens to you, because sometimes it happens for you. Everything in life is there for your own spiritual growth. And just remember that if you're on the spiritual path, even negative circumstances, you could turn those into positive things. You could turn those into things that will ultimately uplift your soul, you know? And when you are in that mentality where even the negative things in life are blessings in disguise, positive reinforcements for your growth, then you know you're on the path of progressive evolution. And at that point, you stop feeling like a victim of circumstances and you start co-creating reality.
Beautiful, brother. So we end every episode with a section called the final trio, which are some questions that we like to ask at the very end. Before we get into that, where would you like to send people to connect with your work and everything that you have going on right now?
They could go to my website, ourcosmicorigin.com, where they could access all my classes, my links to all my platforms. Of course, my YouTube channel, The Real Ismael Perez, where I'm constantly posting transmissions from the commanders, giving people updates. And my books, both Our Cosmic Origin, revealing the history of the multiverse, and The Secret Government, are available through Amazon.
Beautiful. We'll include links to everything once again. The first question I had for you, brother, was, you've said before that may the truth come out so that it heals the world. After everything you've given to this world, you know, the books, the transmissions, all the interviews you've done, the teachings, what truth above all others do you most want humanity to remember before the convergence arrives?
That there is no separation, that we are everything. We are the animals, we are the trees, the plants, the planets, the solar system, the universe. There is no separation between us and everything else. We just have to remember that we are everything.
What do you know about humanity, the people on this earth right now, that makes you certain that we are going to make it?
All of the work that everyone's doing, I was able to acknowledge all of the light work coming from all these different beautiful souls that are contributing to the collective awakening. And I've always believed that this whole team of beautiful individuals were going to incarnate at this particular period in time, coming from the future, in order to secure the organic positive timeline. And so I wanted to thank everyone that is doing the work, that is helping to uplift humanity. As I am only one, you know, I believe that everyone that is here from the future is a galactic emissary.
We're back.
We're back. Yeah, we come from the future. Well, I came to understand that the higher dimensions are equated to the future. So as we go into future Earth, we're technically talking about Earth in the 4D, 5D, and beyond.
Last question, brother, I had for you today is, what is the one thing that you've never said publicly before that you know is true, that you have been waiting for the right moment to say?
Oh, wow, that is a good question. What are the things that I've never said publicly before that I want to mention? Wow, I have to really think about that, Emilio. That was a stunner.
It's good to have this sacred pause as we end the conversation, just to leave a moment of integration, right?
Right. I feel like I've already mentioned everything that I need to mention, but you know, one of the things that I haven't mentioned is in the book that I'm writing, working on Cosmic Destiny, and that is that how can I best explain this? We are a universe. Every single one of you is a universe. We just don't understand how we connect to everything. And that explains why there are multiple universes. And so, as above, so below, we as a universe is also broken off into little u's. And those are called the cells. So, your cells are also little aspects of you, and there's billions of those within your body. To the cells, you are a universe. Just like in terms of the macro, we are cells to the universes. So everything reflects on every level of reality, on every scale. In turn, your cells in your body also are universes with galaxies and planets. Believe it or not, everything just continues going. It's part of the holographic concept of reality. We're dealing with infinity. Whether you go up in the scales, in turn, each universe is a cell in a greater cosmic body, or whether you go down in the scales, each atom, each molecule, each cell is also a universe at a lower scale of reality, and everything repeats. So we're dealing with infinity. We're dealing with infinity.
As above, so below.
Bingo.
Thank you so much, brother. It's been an honor to co-we with you once again. I know that this conversation will also create many ripples, realizations, insights, and remembrances for a lot of people out there. And I just wanted to honor you for the work, the dedication, the devotion that you have to bring this information out. You know, and it's not coming from a selfish place. It's really an open-hearted, just, you know, overflow of wisdom. And so I wanted to honor you for that. And also inviting people to, if they're not already subscribed to both our channels, to go deeper into this rabbit hole. We're going to be covering a lot more conversations together and with many other beautiful people in this movement. So thank you for the work that you do. And I look forward to our next conversation very, very soon.
Likewise, brother. Thank you.